Thanks for joining me today, Sunday, the 8th of March, 2026. And today I am going to talk about the late Jesse Jackson, who was laid to rest, I believe, Friday or today, sometime in recent days. And of course, Jesse Jackson was most known for his presidential run back in 1983 when the U.S. was, of course, not ready for a black president who had lived the black experience in the US. They wasn't ready for that. He was a poet, a leader, a teacher, a preacher. He was a lot of things. And as a young adult, I was impressed. I was. He did not stand a chance of being a black president because not of these United States. For one thing, he was always pro-Palestinian. So, for that reason alone, they had to come up with a reason for why he should not be president of these United States. So they got some bootleg to betray him with a recording of Jesse referring to New York City as Jaime Town. Like that was the worst thing a person could say, the worst thing a human could say, especially if they were running for the highest office in the US. And guess what? At his death, people were still bitching about that. The fact that he referred to New York City as Jaime Town. And guess what? In 2026, New York City is Jaime Town. It's still Jaime Town. Is that the worst thing I can say in 2026? Don't be foolish. He was a friend with Fidel Castro, and the US, of course, hates anything or anybody that's friendly or has an alliance with Cuba. He was from the same generation as H. Rat Brown. Yeah. But H. Rat Brown, when compared to Jesse Jackson, H. Rat was extremely radical. And because Jesse had ran with Martin Luther King, he wasn't a threat. Not really. Yeah, but they had to come up with a way for why he couldn't be president. And they did. One of the things that Jesse did that was very impressive was the way he was able to go and use his charisma and diplomacy and get U.S. hostages released. Something that U.S. politicians couldn't do or wouldn't do, or it just wasn't important. At one time, Jesse Jackson was responsible for 22 U.S. citizens being released from Cuba. I believe it happened in 1986. You can go Google it. And so that was impressive. I was impressive. I remember when he released Robert Goodman from Syria. That was in 1983. There were other instances where Jesse went in there and released the hostages, got negotiated hostage releases. That's what he did. They didn't seem like they made a big deal out of the when he went to Cuba, but it's right here on the front of the New York Times. New York Times, 1984. Jackson back in U.S. from Cuba with prisoners set free by Castro. That's on the front of the New York Times. But they don't want you to talk about that. They want to talk about, something he said that really didn't mean much because it was true. But yeah, he was quite a phenomenal man to do what he did on the behalf of the United States, a country, his country where he was born, who would not give him, you know, equality, so to speak. He had a sense of humor. He certainly did. He was on Saturday Night Live once and he read Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. I'm sure that can be found on the internet somewhere. He appears in an episode of Soul, which was a TV show on local TV out of New York City back in the 70s. It came on Channel 13 in New York City, and it was a cultural show. It was political. And Jesse was on there, talking about his Operation Push people united to save humanity. And he talked about the importance of leadership and how to build grassroots movements and different things. And the people sat around listening to him intently with what he had to say. And he was real passionate, you know. And those things that he would say, don't be a fool, say in school, and lots and lots of things that just kind of stayed in your head, and it made you feel like you was somebody. But Soul is an excellent episode, an opportunity to see Jesse when he was at his peak. In 1972, Jesse was 30 years old. And he was talking to the host about how old his mother was at the time. His mother was 66 years old at the time. And it is just amazing to see him, 50 years ago. And he's, talking what he always used to talk. So Soul was a highly cultural show. It was highly political, and it did speak to the needs and wants of the Black community. That was the point of Soul. And if you want to see him in his prime, that's where you can look to see him. So of course the Rainbow Coalition is something he started, and it was co-opted and became something, I think, quite different from what he intended it to be. And of course, Jesse was always an activist for, gay rights. He was. Um, and one thing that he was famous for was he hosted the Save the Children expo that happened in Chicago. I believe it was 1973. It's a Netflix documentary, but you can see it without having Netflix. Another thing about Jesse is that South Park did an episode that was entitled "With Apologies to Jesse Jackson." It's from season 11, episode 1. And all I'll say about the episode that it's about what happens when somebody refers to a guy as the nigger guy. So if you watch the show, you'll get the gist of it, and you know how extreme and how insensitive South Park is. I thought it was an interesting episode. And as an episode, they had to go to the Senate to talk about that being said, especially calling that saying that to white guys, right? So, as in the series, the episode, it would have to take an act of Congress in real life to tame that, because it would be all out war against Black people, and white people would feel threatened being called that name. So, yeah. Jesse Jackson was a man who made a big impression on me. He was the reason why I finally registered to vote. Yeah. So politically, he made me politically aware of some things, and the powers that be today are the same powers, um, people in power that was in power back then. So they wasn't ready for him in a world that was fair and balanced. Jesse could have been a Black president, and then when Obama came along, maybe he would have been a better president. But as it stands now, I think that Jesse Jackson would have been an all-around better president. And he did cry tears of joy when Obama won, but he was pro-Palestinian, always had been. And that is why he became the man who would be the U.S. president. May he rest in power, Jesse Louis Jackson.